Home Secretary, you're promising new legislation to outlaw AI-generated images of child abuse. How will you police that?
Morning, Trevor. Well, what we need to do is to strengthen the law, first of all, and then make sure that we've got the stronger regulatory powers in place as well. This is a real disturbing phenomenon that we've got, where we've known for some time the online child sexual abuse material is growing, but also the grooming of children, teenagers online. And what's now happening is that AI is putting this on steroids, and it is making it easier for perpetrators, for abusers to groom children. And it's also meaning that they are manipulating images of children and then using them to draw and to blackmail young people into further abuse. It's just the most vile of crimes. So what we need to do is to strengthen the law, and that includes banning some of the sort of AI models being used for child abuse, but also banning some of the paedophile manuals, effectively these AI manuals that are being used. The National Crime Agency does immensely important work, but they are saying these further powers are needed, and they will then be able to use them to get prosecutions to keep more children safe.
It's hard to think of a crime that feels more evil. But let's be clear. Is this legislation going to mean that if someone uses AI to make an image but doesn't share it, that they'll have committed a criminal offence?
So we know that the creating of these AI images is in itself, it is abusive of children. So very often they're using images of real children and then abusing them, manipulating them and making them sexualised. These are being circulated then in these huge forums. And what the National Crime Agency will say is this is drawing more perpetrators into more extreme and more sadistic abuse. And frankly, this is just dangerous.
But just as a matter of principle, people may do things that are offensive and disgusting and repellent, but does that amount to criminal behaviour?
I think when it comes to children, then yes, it does, because it's children that we need to protect. And what the evidence shows is that the escalation of this material also is more likely to lead to offline abuse, and it is being used directly to traumatise children online. The grooming, the getting them to share images, getting them to be drawn into streaming abuse. So this is real. I'm really worried that people think, oh, well, it's AI, we shouldn't take it seriously. Actually, the evidence is that what it's doing is it's actually escalating and accelerating the abuse, and that's why the laws that we're bringing in, this is world-leading. Other countries are not yet doing this, but I hope everyone else will follow.
All right, let's turn to the issue of the week, which has been economics, growth and trade. This morning, President Trump has imposed tariffs on trade with China, Mexico and Canada. We could be next. Prime Minister's in Brussels tomorrow. Is it time for us to draw closer to the EU to protect our economy?
Well, we want stronger trading relationships all over the world. It's why we've been working on resetting the relationship with our European neighbours so that we can improve trade, so that we can improve law enforcement cooperation. We're doing the same, for example, on tackling the dangerous small boat crossings. We need that stronger cooperation with France, with Germany. So, of course, we need to strengthen that cooperation and also look for stronger trading relationships with the US and other countries as well. That's part of growth.
Does stronger cooperation with the EU mean, for example, a new customs agreement?
Well, we've always said that some of the red lines as part of that reset is no return to the customs union, to the single market or to free movement, and that remains the case.
So, of course, absolutely no movement on any of that?
Well, of course, what you want to do is to have to get rid of some of the bureaucracy around some of the customs arrangements as goods cross borders, but that's about actually us reducing bureaucracy because, frankly, the deal that the previous Conservative government got actually was not a good one in terms of making sure we can reduce the bureaucracy and help businesses trade better.
Well, let's test that out. How are you getting on with negotiating a youth mobility scheme with the EU?
Well, we've been clear that we need net migration to come down. Under the Conservatives, net migration quadrupled in the space of 4 years. That was the wrong thing for the UK. So we're clear that net migration needs to come down. So that's why this is not an approach that we are looking for.
So no youth mobility scheme?
That's not the right starting point for us at all, because what we need to do is to bring net migration down, and we're clear that has to mean, for example, recognising that it's work migration that massively increased at the same time as training in the UK was plummeting. That's really damaging.
OK, and I'm not entirely sure I got a clear answer, forgive me, I missed it, on a customs arrangement.
Well, no to the customs union. That's what we've said.
Not a union, but maybe something that would make things easier. For example, joining what is called the Pan-European Mediterranean Convention that maybe would take away some of those frictions.
I mean, I think the Chancellor said, look, we'll look at reducing ways to reduce frictions. That's absolutely the right thing to do, but we're not returning to a customs union. But those are all the sorts of things that, if you look at, what are the different ways in which you can reduce bureaucracy for business, that is the right thing to do. But you do it in a framework which says we are outside the EU, we're not returning to the EU, that's been clear. We need to move on and build those better, stronger trading relationships to support businesses.
All right, well, let me just ask you that finally on this point then, what might seem a rather nerdy point, but you are putting through a piece of legislation which is essentially which is called a product regulation and metrology bill. I've got to read it here. And it seems like a technical piece of legislation, but it says that ministers will have the power to make provision which corresponds or is similar to a provision of relevant EU law for the purpose of reducing and mitigating the environmental impact of products. Now, what I read that to mean is that the business secretary or the relevant minister can simply wave his or her hand and make an arrangement that will make some products go to and from the EU much more easily without recourse to Parliament, as long as they can say it makes environmental sense. Now, that's quite a good way of getting round these frictions, isn't it?
Well, do you know what, Trevor? I have to say, no disrespect, but I am coming on the programme with Home Secretary in the context of all of the issues that we're addressing around migration,
my point is
leasing.
You keep using...
I have to say, I did not expect to be asked about the product regulation and meteorology.
This is exactly the point. You guys think we don't pay attention. Look, my point is that this piece of regulation, it may seem like something marginal and nerdy, but essentially what it does is give ministers the power to decide that you can change the rules to get into alignment with the EU, which is one of the things you said you would never do.
No, so look, there is some principles here, and I think these are the ones that I've rehearsed already. So we're not returning to the single market, not returning to the customs union, not returning to free movement. We need to get net migration coming down, so that's really important. And then within those, we've got those red lines, but what we also want to do is to reduce some of the bureaucracy, some of the additional burdens on businesses. That's the right thing to do. So I think actually the fact that we want to champion businesses, the fact that building that growth as part of the plan for change the Prime Minister set out, all of that is incredibly important. And I think businesses across the country would support that.
All right.
Rather than...
OK. You slightly surprised me that you hadn't read the bill, but anyway. All right, let's just talk about growth, which is the Chancellor's been talking about this week. The Scottish courts this week blocked oil and gas extraction from 2 North Sea fields, but said the companies could reapply for the licences as soon as the government amends its licences. Just the guidelines, I beg your pardon. Can you reassure the energy companies this morning that you're going to make it possible for them to get drilling as soon as it's physically possible?
So, look, there's the court process, which I think, from memory, was also linked to a previous Supreme Court decision. And so there's that process all has to be worked through and so on. But again, you go back to the principles, which is the UK government committed to supporting business, to working with businesses to deliver growth. Alongside that, we need to make sure that we are meeting our clean power commitments as part of the plan for change and support businesses as we do.
But this is very concrete. Do you want these companies, Shell and the 2 others involved, to be able to drill in the Jackdaw and Rosebank oil fields, yes or no?
The legal processes have to be worked through. Those were decisions for the courts. But we've said that existing licences need to be able to carry on, but we also need to be able to move to clean power.
So that's yes. Let me ask you about another potential issue on growth. On Thursday, the Chancellor cited the £450 million AstraZeneca development plan for Merseyside as evidence of Britain's bright future under Labour. On Friday, AstraZeneca canned the development. They said that they weren't going to go ahead, and I'm quoting here, amongst their reasons, the timing and reduction of the final offer compared to the previous government's proposal. You guys blew it, didn't you?
Well, and I understand that AstraZeneca had also changed some of their proposals, but I think the
they're pretty clear. They said it's government.
Look, I obviously wasn't involved in those conversations, but I understand there were some changes. But what you also have to look at is a whole series of investment announcements, including a £9 billion contract for Rolls-Royce. That is having a huge impact. You've got the announcements now, the IMF upgrading the growth forecasts, and also evidence that now businesses are saying that the UK is one of the best places.
Yeah, but the Tories made AstraZeneca an
the
offer which you didn't fulfil. That's a point.
Well, I think that the proposal had changed from AstraZeneca, but it's not obviously one that I was involved in. But I think what you have seen is, alongside the work to fix the difficult foundations, a lot of work with business on getting that increase in business investment, which has now shot up, and we've got one of the highest levels of business investment taking place for years. That's really important. It will take time to have an impact. But
sorry to interrupt you, but let's go to your own territory here, which is legal migration. The Office of National Statistics said this week that the UK population is going to rise by 4.9 million over the decade to 2032, fastest rise in our lifetimes. Is that what you want? And that's all going to be through immigration. Is that what you want to happen?
Well, we want net migration to come down, and it needs to. It shot up, it quadrupled under the Conservatives in the space of just 4 years. That was a series of...
But this is a forecast for your time in office.
Well, but those the statistical forecasts are based on the history of the last few years and what has happened. We are clear that net migration needs to come down. Big driver behind the increase in net migration has been overseas recruitment. And overseas recruitment has shot up in a series of areas where training has fallen and where actually we've seen fewer UK working-age residents in the labour market. So a series of policy failures that's then led to this really relaxed free market approach to allowing businesses to just be able to recruit from overseas instead of training in the UK. Yeah, but so we're going to drawing up a white paper which is about how you better link the immigration system to training and skills obligations.
With respect, all your predecessors in the seat also said there's going to be training. It takes time to train.
Well, no, you've got to link them. You've got to link them together.
I know, but
they didn't. They never did. They said training, and then actually what they did was training plummeted, and net migration soared because they just lost control of the system. They didn't have proper checks in place.
You're saying you want to bring down net migration. Your colleague Angela Rayner wants to build 1.5 million houses. The construction bosses, I'm going to show you this, say that we need 96,000 extra construction workers every year. But the number of construction workers per thousand population is dropping, actually. No amount of finagling is going to change that. You're not going to change that in the next couple of years. So how do you manage this? What are you going to do? You need people to build homes. They're going to have to come from abroad, but that's what Rachel Reeves needs. You want to bring down the numbers. You can't do both at the same time.
Well, that's exactly why what you have to do is link the immigration system and the training and skills system. So the new way in which we would need this to work is the Migration Advisory Committee, which looks at issues around visas, makes advice on shortage occupations, needs to be properly linked to Skills England, that draws up training plans, needs to be properly linked to workforce plans, for example.
That is all going to take time. Why don't you do the simple thing? You could reduce the flow by making it harder for immigrant family workers to bring their families. The Conservatives plan to double the salary threshold needed to support a spouse or a dependent to £40,000. Now, you've put a pause on that. Why don't you just adopt their policy and actually bring down the numbers now, rather than waiting for people to be trained and all of that?
Well, the numbers are coming down now, and we are continuing with the increase in the salary threshold, the restriction
You are going
on
to increase
dependents,
the salary threshold.
The skilled worker salary threshold, we have supported the increase. We actually called for it to increase before the previous government put it forward. We also called for the removal of the 20% discount, the unfair wage discount for people being recruited from abroad. That was something that Conservatives brought in after 2019. We called for it to be removed. It has been removed. We're sustaining that. We've also continuing with restrictions, for example, on bringing dependents for graduate students and for social care workers. So all of those measures are in place. We're currently drawing up further measures that will particularly target these areas that you rightly talked about, whether that be in IT, it be in construction, it be in engineering, where for far too long we have been recruiting from abroad and failing to train here in the UK. So there has to be, I think, more requirements on employers. For employers who are wanting to be able to recruit from abroad, actually what they should be doing instead is showing that they are training and recruiting here in the UK.
One last question, which is about combating illegal immigration. Tony Blair, mostly overstayers, actually, Tony Blair says digital identity credentials, the digital ID card. Are you in favour of that?
So non-UK resident or non-UK citizens already have to have biometric residence permits, already to have what will effectively be, with the rollout of e-visas, is digital ID. The problem is it's hardly ever checked until now. So we have, since the election, increased raids on illegal working by 30%, increased arrests by 25%.
But what about the digital ID cards for everybody?
Well, that's what...
That would allow you to distinguish.
I know, but as Trevor just explained, Trevor, people who are non-UK citizens already have to have the ID and the cards, but they're never checked. So you can have all the ID in the world, but if nobody actually ever checks, then there's no proper system to make sure the rules are respected and enforced. Since the election, the biggest change we have done already in 6 months is to increase enforcement, to increase returns. 16,500 people returned since the election of people who had no right to be in the UK. It's really important we support a proper, fair, working immigration system, because people have always come to this country from all over the world to work, to study, but the system has to be enforced. It hasn't been for too long, and that's what we're doing.
Home Secretary, thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks, Trevor.